Welcome back into another episode of Making the Leap. We're so glad to have you with us today. We've got great guests with Josh Hurlbert today. We've got some emails to be talking about. We've got just some different things happening in the news today. So we're glad to have you on board.
Kind of a refresher course on what goes on in our instance, this is the state capitol. But we like every now and again to talk with legislators just to kind of give you a sense of what legislators are doing, thinking, talking about, how to talk with them, what to keep an eye on. Even though it's a Missouri-focused conversation to a degree, I hope it's edifying to everybody wherever you live.
And it is Missouri-focused, you're right, but I think as we're going to see, or as we are seeing, this issue dealing with school choice specifically and funding and ESAs, that is moving nationwide, and it's
I would say the struggles as to why it's not happening, even amongst Republicans.
Right.
Like, what's the conflict there? What are they up against? What are they hearing? Why is it not working?
But even if you're, in a state, these are ways to encourage you to start checking on what is happening in your state when it comes to legislation, because I think that is something that needs to be in people's forefront.
We forgot in the previous episode to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day, so we're like 2 weeks late saying happy Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, and we can also go ahead and say happy upcoming Father's Day, in case we don't.
Our recording schedule sometimes doesn't always
line up for that, but that's okay. I think I almost at first I thought that would bother me, honestly, when we talked about doing this, but I think it's okay to reference some of the different things. I think it's hilariously ironic that we can run around talking about mothers and fathers and happy Mother's Day and Father's Day as everything is getting trashed.
There's an interesting story at the Daily Caller. It's actually an editorial.
Okay.
And I know you have an email to share, but I just thought going with Mother's Day, I thought you'd like it. I'm not going to read it all, but Carrie Lucas is the author.
Okay.
It's called The Break Moms Need. Flowers, cards, breakfast in bed, iconic Mother's Day gifts, but conventional wisdom now holds what busy moms really want is a break from the stress of caring for others. Mother's Day now includes annual calls for more societal support, financial and otherwise, to help overburdened moms. That's all fine, but this year I'd like to get more specific. We moms could definitely use a more supportive society for raising our kids, but that begins with fighting trends that are making parenting so much harder than it should be. I've been a parent for nearly 18 years, she says. Raising 5 kids, I've watched as the culture surrounds children become more and more coarse and hostile to children's interests. Today, parents can no longer trust that programming billed as appropriate for preschoolers really will be. Parents used to be able to let kids indulge in a couple of hours of Saturday morning cartoons without really having to think too much about it. Now parents know that media companies, particularly those targeting kids, see part of their mission as pushing a political agenda. And we've now complicated the innocent world of children's television so that parents have to wonder about the sexual messages and gender identities of cartoon characters on their television sets. Not just media, same for our schools, she writes. Parents used to walk in and out of their elementary schoolers' classrooms, take part in library time, feel confident their schools were a partner in not just teaching the ABCs, but positive lessons about personal responsibility, basic good behavior. Today, parents like me are told that we have to submit FOIA requests and typically pay $100 fees if we want to know the content of our public school curriculum.
Wow.
Fear of the spread of COVID allowed schools to embrace policies meant to keep parents out of classrooms, libraries, halls. Yet these practices now remain. As a 5th grade class mom, I recently showed up to drop off a gift for Teacher Appreciation Week and was told I had to leave it at the front office. I couldn't actually go into the school and into my child's classroom. I sadly realized it was really for the best, since I would have struggled to find my daughter's classroom, since getting past the front office is taboo. It didn't used to be like this. Parents shouldn't have to wonder what's happening in their children's schools. School systems shouldn't fight so hard to keep parents in the dark. That's Carrie Lucas, president of Independent Women's Forum. She goes on, but I thought that was a fitting way to kick off the show today. The break moms need.
And considering also last week when we talked with Tricia Hanska, who was talking a lot about just kind of the science, the kingdom education piece, and one of the reasons that she chose the school that she chose for her kids was that open door policy was being welcomed into the school, which I can absolutely attest is 100% not only true, but encouraged and valued. And I think that is one of the biggest differences I noticed. I did see that trend starting to happen in our kids' elementary school as we were on our way out. Not to that extent, but I know that it is now. As I talk to people that were, that are still there in that school, that is one of their struggles, is that they remember 6-7 years ago when every parent was welcomed, every mom was welcomed, every dad was welcomed for the class parties and the concerts and all that, and now they're not,
Yeah, it's actually sort of a chilling idea that you send your children, your own children, off to a school that won't allow you in to see what they're doing with them. It chills me, actually. I don't mean to be too dramatic about it.
No, it should be chilling. It should be, because why? You can cite safety reasons all day, and I know that we have an issue that has to be addressed with safety. But I think it's more than that. I think there are other reasons. They don't want the screenshot of the poster on the wall ending up on social media. They don't want the pushback, that kind of thing. But I will say, when we enrolled our son in kindergarten, our oldest, that was here in Missouri, and he had a wonderful, wonderful kindergarten teacher. But every time I went to the school to do anything, whatever it was, I was stopped at the front all the time. Never could even just wait for him. Even if I was picking him up, I had to go back and wait outside. I could never go in past those doors. I could never stand in that little lobby. Couldn't do any of that. And they were not nice about it. And again, there is a safety thing, but when you're scanning licenses that, prove that I am who I am, that I am his mom, there's no court information on me that says I'm not allowed to see him, any of that. And then I will say, when we left that school and went to where he then went through 5 years of elementary, it was very different. I was able to be in that school, and I was able to go pop in and out, talk as I needed to. I knew the teachers, I knew how to find the classrooms, and that has since shifted at that school.
Yeah, you can treat us like that at the DMV, but you can't treat us like that with our children.
That's exactly how it felt. I mean, it was just very formulaic, wait here, take your number, can't talk to you. Yeah. They weren't friendly. I didn't know their names.
Yeah, public schools should not be like the DMV.
No. There has to be a balance. I mean, that's what we continually talk about. There has to be a balance, and that has shifted.
A team of researchers from Harvard, Stanford, Dartmouth, and Johns Hopkins. Shocker. Brand new story. This at Hot Air. COVID restrictions and school closures were disastrous for children. Huh.
Really?
The research is clear. The longer schools are closed, regardless of race or income, the worse the outcomes for students and the more persistent the losses, and the more social restrictions put on our child's social activity outside of school, the worse off the children were. Bottom line, learning loss was consistent and universal, regardless of demographics. Black, white, rich, poor, it didn't matter. The longer kids were kept out of schools, the worse the learning loss. And so far, no learning recovery has taken place. And what determined how long our kids were locked out of school is largely determined by who controlled your schools politically. And I'm going to refrain from answering that, but I think most people listening know who was running the schools that were closed.
100%.
So all the Ivy League schools have now signed up. All the Harvard and Stanford and Dartmouth and Johns Hopkins have all confirmed that, we really screwed our kids up.
Right, which is good, because then we also have, the people, the teachers' unions and things that acted like, no, we wanted all the schools, but we never wanted any of that, right?
Yeah. Like Randy Weingarten, the revisionist history. Yes. Yeah, they always wanted the schools open. In fact, Jenny Gentles wrote something about that, didn't she?
She did, yes. And actually, let me flip that around. Yes, so she did that, Randy's walking around now with no remorse, coming out. And so the teachers' union president who did everything in her power to spread fear among teachers in their communities and therefore prolong school closures, appeared before the U.S. House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic earlier this week. Throughout the hearing, in her written testimony and in subsequent media interviews, she attempted to rewrite history by claiming that she wanted schools open since April of 2020, and she tried to open them safely. Yeah. And that was ridiculous. And I was so glad when I saw this piece. So like you said, this was Jenny Gentles, who we've had on here a couple of times. Just an op-ed that actually came through the Independent Women's Forum as well. She put that out there. And then I would encourage people actually to go and find it, because she goes through tweet or comment after tweet and refutes all of these things and all these statements. And I think something like that, that's what we need. We need people to go ahead. It's not enough to just throw a screenshot out there, but to say, you said this, this was the actuality, and that's important. There were definite people fighting back on that, as Randy Weingarten was saying those things. Representative Marionette Miller Meeks out of Iowa, Republican out of Iowa, echoed the anger of parents by admonishing the union leader, the effect on children has been vast, and to have no remorse on closing schools and keeping them closed for the length of time is unconscionable. And that is what I think a lot of people keep coming back to, is that lack of remorse, not just the infuriating piece of trying to rewrite that history, but there's no, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I messed up. And to act like she was just right there along with us as I was busy shouting from the rooftops, let's open schools, when 100% union leaders were not saying those same things. So I would definitely go and look that up. I think Ginny puts a lot out about kind of calling some of those leaders to the carpet repeatedly on saying, here's what actually happened. Here's where the damage is that you've done. And then I wanted to share too, an article or an email that came through to us. So we had our anniversary event a little over a month ago. We had
Great crowd.
Packed crowd. Yes.
Yep.
Great crowd. Lots of great conversation and lots of good emails. And today I wanted to share one of them.
Yeah. Thanks for your notes, by
event.
the way.
Yes.
If you have thoughts or additional comments, or
Always.
you ever want to send us some thoughts, suggestions, guest ideas, we always love to get them. Where do people?
So they can go ahead and email us at hello@makingtheelitepodcast.com. That's where this one came into play. And I do love these. I love getting them. I love reading them, seeing them. I always go back and forth on, do I answer everything individually, or do I try to bring them here where we can address them, respond to them, talk to them? So this was from Brad, who emailed us, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but
Where's he come from? Do we know where he lives? He's in the area?
St. Joe, near St. Joe, Missouri.
St. Joe, Missouri.
So near St. Joe, so local, but still a drive to come down here, which I, number one, thought that was really great. So he said, hey, Christine and Chris, this is Brad. We met with you at the Herzog Foundation at the annual event. To be honest, I had only listened to a few of your podcasts prior to the event. After you had Anna and Maddie, who is Maddie Salmon, a guest that we also had on with us a few months back. After you had them talk at the event, I felt I had to go listen to more. So with the time I had on my hands right now, I went out on our 30 acres, put on my headphones, and binged you guys for the last 10 days or so, knocking out all 55 episodes.
Wow.
What a tremendous effort. Congratulations on an exceptional podcast series. We have already chatted with Matt and Amy Barnard for over an hour about starting another Christian school in St. Joe.
Great.
And then in that email, he talked about he and his wife, Lori, who are hoping to be able to transition to kind of a Christian school setting to teach, keeping it affordable. He says, we know God is not a genie, but I believe we cannot, as one of your guests pointed out, send our kids to public school indoctrination for 8 hours a day and then maybe give the youth pastor a half hour on a Wednesday night to deprogram them. Totally unfair to both our kids and the pastor. So we need to look to heaven and ask God to bless that.
Awesome.
And so then he talked a little bit more about just Herzog, offered up some different articles and some podcasts for us to listen to. But that is the kind of engagement that I just so thoroughly enjoy when it comes up. So he took the time to come out, visit with us, write us that email, and look to perhaps in the near future, maybe in the next year or so, start a school of their own. And I think that's just a tremendous undertaking, and it's inspiring, and I love sharing that with people.
I have to say, I'm thrilled that he went back, and I would just say, those of you that jump into this and you're just hearing some of these shows, I do hope, I'm not saying it just for shameless self-promotion, the body of these shows have featured so many fascinating people from whom we've learned a great deal, and it covers all different facets and subjects, so binging it. I think that might be the first time we've ever been binged. But I do hope that people will go back and either refresh themselves or listen to some of our earlier episodes, because I think they're useful resources in a lot of them.
Yeah, and when he referenced like Matt and Amy Barnard, who we've had on a couple of times now as well, they were a couple who kind of said, we have this pull to start this school. And they did, and it is growing, and they're going to continue to grow. I love seeing their posts on social media. We're hiring this teacher. We need to hire this teacher, that kind of thing. They also, he mentioned specifically, referencing Luke and Jamie Johnson, who we had on, or Johnson, who we had on with us, who are starting a school in Kansas City that is about to open. And that is another type of Christian school. It's a very affordable option for Christian school. But then I also was really loving that he referenced that, again, I'm biased, but referenced our daughter speaking and Maddie speaking, because those are two, they're kids. No offense to Maddie, I'll call her a kid, even though she's, a 19-year-old.
Young people.
She's young. But these kids, they have important things to say. And I love that God is using them in ways that can inspire somebody here who's thinking, well, I might need to start a school. My wife and I, after all these years, we might need to go into this realm. What a crazy, cool way that God is bringing everything together.
Yeah,
for
I
people.
think kids that are a product of this effort are far more impressive than most of the adults who teach it and lead it, only because you see the fruits of the labor. They are their own lights. They're the best representatives of this because they're the finished product.
They really are.
And I, it was just as we discussed with Tricia last week. She said she told us off the show. It didn't make the show, unfortunately, and I wish she'd told us. She said that her husband was kind of against the idea of putting their kids into a private Christian school until they were in a classroom setting, I believe.
They were teaching high schoolers. They were doing like a youth group. They were helping to lead a youth group at church. And so her husband was working with, I think, freshmen and
freshman boys. This is a really amazing story. I hope she doesn't mind us telling it.
I think she'd be okay.
I think she thought about telling it.
Yes, and she said her husband was sitting there, whose family all really had a lot of public education background within them. Not her husband himself, he wasn't a teacher, but had a background in it. These boys,
I think
they
we
were
just
going
confused people, though.
What? No. Her husband does not work in education, but he had the background in education, having family members that were in public education.
Mean, just to keep it, at least for me, simple. They were leading a Bible study with a bunch of freshman boys.
So they were. Right. So he's not a teacher per se of any kind, but he was leading these boys. They were opening up the Bible. They were reading. And the ones who could physically read were the ones that had been sitting in a Christian school, and the ones that could not read the Bible. And it is heartbreaking for me to say that we're all in public education. And there's obviously a lot to unpack within that statement. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But he saw that and was like, well, they're doing something right here in terms of just education in general. Yep. So that's where we're going to go ahead and send our kids. Yeah. And so that was a tremendous thing. Again, and she and I also talked, as we continue to say, we aren't looking to bash all these teachers. I think teachers are up against so much. There's a reason that there are kids not able to read, because they are being inundated with a whole bunch of other programs that are coming at that are basically taking the place a lot of times of education. When it used to be there was a debate like phonics or no phonics. Well, now it's phonics, no phonics, DEI this, SEL this, we have CRT this. We have all these things coming in to play, not to mention the behavioral, not to mention the learning gaps that are going to be evident for years to come for all these kids. So, but that was a huge testament to that. So I was really glad that she said that to us, that I wanted to bring that up. And that kind of leads us into having Josh with us today.
Always great to check in with one of our favorite legislators. He happens to be ours. The 8th District of Missouri is what he represents in the Missouri legislature. He's Josh Hurlbert back with us. And Josh, Representative, thanks for your time today to give us a little breakdown and perspective from one state capital. Glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on again.
We're so glad.
You've been on the radio show a few times in Kansas City as well, and we had you in primarily to kind of discuss where you think things stand. This happens to be home base for us, but as you kind of look out over the
landscape
I know you don't represent anybody but Missourians, but 6 states now have full-blown school choice. I think Texas is coming on pretty quick. Where do things stand for you, and how do you forecast other states maybe following suit?
Yeah, absolutely. This week that Oklahoma came out that they're going to get that bill finalized over there, which is a great move. And strangely enough, another one of our neighbors that are passing ed reform and not
so
the state of
weird,
Missouri.
Josh, right? Iowa, Arkansas, Oklahoma now. Kansas and Missouri can't seem to figure it out, which is strange because I think a lot of people assume that these are two super red states, but for some reason can't move as fast.
No. Yeah. Well, it was, from an ed reform perspective, it was a disappointing session. We had a lot of momentum going in nationwide into to carry us into Jeff City, and every single reform measure ended up dying. We had the fewest number of bills passed, aside from the COVID-shortened year, in the past 20 years in Jeff City this year.
Overall, or just related to educational reform?
Overall, just as
Wow.
on a policy, we had 43 policy bills, which was the fewest we've seen since the Republicans took over, aside from that 2020 COVID-shortened year.
And so why is that? I mean, I'm interrupting you, but why does that happen? That there's so few that actually are going to get passed, that are going to get,
We are very good in Jefferson City at shooting ourselves in the foot.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of difference in opinion. I mean, granted, Missouri's a very diverse state. You have, Republicans that, represent suburbs. You have Republicans who represent very rural areas.
Yes.
And those areas have very different needs. And I understand that, different communities have different needs that way. But as for, a unity and vision, and this is what we're going to do as a Republican supermajority in Jefferson City, there's just not a lot of vision or cohesion that way.
One positive was that you guys did at least define boys and girls sports and you moved to protect that. So there was some movement on that front. Yes?
Absolutely.
Talk
So
about
what
that.
we passed in Senate Bill 39 was to mandate that you have to play in the sport on your birth certificate that you were given at birth. So no more boys identifying as a girl and then, not taking the podium in a girl's sport.
Wow.
If there's a sport that we don't offer for girls, they can play on the boys' team, but beyond that, you have to be separated in high school athletics on what your by your birth certificate.
So somebody that is, like we had this at our old school, a girl that wants to play football, there's no girls football. She can go play
Absolutely.
here,
Yes.
and that's fine, but she can't. But a boy can't go in and say, I'm going to swim for the girls' swim team because I'm going to call myself a girl.
Absolutely.
They can't do that.
Correct.
I like that. Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Was that met with much opposition?
There was, not necessarily from within the party. It was a fairly unanimous vote within the Republican circles. We had 3 Republicans vote no on the surgery and therapy ban, and then we had 2 Republicans vote no on the sports side of it all. So in the House.
Our colleagues at the Lion had a piece that has gotten a lot of national attention. There was a teacher in Kansas who wrote an op-ed at the Lion. It's worth reading if you haven't heard us talk about this. I think we've talked about it in previous episodes. It's making national news because she said, yes, your children are being indoctrinated. Critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion. These are, it's in every state of the union. So I just ask you, through the lens of being a Missouri legislator, has this come up in Jefferson City?
Absolutely. We had a couple different measures. We had a Senate Bill 4 that was introduced by Senator Koenig. It would have removed the teaching of critical race theory from the classroom. It would have made it so that school districts could no longer mandate that their teachers attend these CRT or DEI trainings. It could be voluntary, but you couldn't mandate that everyone go there anymore. That bill passed the Senate. I was happy to vote for it on the Education Committee, and then it never reached the House floor. It was held up, and as part of the brinksmanship we see down in Jeff City all too often, and was never actually brought up. We also had our neighbor over in the Kearney area, Representative Doug Ritchie, had language that he inserted on every House budget bill to prevent DEI trainings within government agencies themselves, so that we couldn't have agency officials trying to do the same
Forcing
kind of thing.
you to do.
Exactly. So, and that got stripped out in the Senate and never put back in either. So it absolutely comes up, but it's one of those things that there's enough diversity and opinion that we couldn't get across the
But
finish
this is
line.
inside your own party.
I was just going to ask.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about this as Republicans.
We're talking red on red,
fighting
here. Yeah, it's red on red violence.
That's so disappointing, and it's so discouraging, and it is the one thing that I do see. I mean, I see you on social media, and I'm on there a lot, and that is what the frustration keeps boiling down to. And then
What do voters need to
it's
know about
hard.
that? How do voters overcome that?
Help.
Help people like you overcome that inside your own party? I assume they need to know how their reps and senators are voting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's paying attention. It's also looking at what we actually bring home. I mean, I'm of the opinion that this session, we had a few wins. I mean, the transgender bans were a big win. I mean, we had some big investments coming through the budget side, but especially on a policy protect side, we were batting 125. I mean, you're looking at Royals level batting here, so
which is bad for you non-sports fans.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, voters should demand better. They should be, watching out for their reps and their senators.
And how do they do that? What is a way other than, because I actually would not advocate utilizing social media as your only space for knowledge. What is a good way? How do people, for somebody that's listening that is like, there's a lot, how do I navigate this? How do you
think
find
most
that
state
out?
reps, since you're a rep, do you think most state, I argue most people don't know who their state rep and senators are.
Sure.
So step one is learning who your state rep is, but step two, pretty open door, do you think, most reps?
Yeah, I think most reps will absolutely be more than happy to meet you over a cup of coffee or answer a constituent's email. Now, if you're from out of the district, I mean, you might be a little tough on luck that way. But if you're a resident of the district, then most reps will absolutely answer that email, take that call, meet you.
And
for
I
coffee.
always tell people, like, if they're not, to me, that's a red flag.
Absolutely.
At least a phone conversation. I get it. You can't probably run all over the place meeting every single person, but at least a phone conversation or answer my emails via text. I say that about school board members. Nothing made me angrier last year than trying to reach school board members for our kids' district and getting one canned response from the superintendent and never knowing if the school board members were even seeing anything that I was asking. So I think the same applies for our legislators that are out there as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that access, there's some, I've especially heard it on the school board side where they're so afraid of sunshine laws and that kind of stuff. And that is absolutely ridiculous. They can absolutely share their own opinions. They can let you know where they stand on the issues. And they absolutely should.
Right.
Josh, the teachers' union opposition to educational reforms, how big is it? How real is it? As a talk show host, I hear teachers' unions thrown around a lot as leading opposition in states' capitals at the federal level. How real is that to you as an elected representative? Are they really the buzzsaw that we hear that they are?
They are a part of it, but here in Missouri, they are not the be-all, end-all when it comes to the opposition to education reform policies.
Okay.
You're running into school administrators, school board associations, the whole bureaucracy, not just teachers union, are really
That's
pushing against this. So, for example, we had a bill that was in the Senate being heard on the last Monday. So we've got 4 days left, and they're debating a bill that would have actually put $500 million more into public schools, but it was also opening up more virtual school options and just making it easier for kids to go to a virtual school if that's the choice they want to do. The school associations all shot it down and were able to kill that bill because it still gave more power to parents and took all that decision making out of the schools themselves. So, it is all about control. It's all about keeping their little fiefdom intact and keeping it away from parental choice.
And see, I think that's something important that parents should know in the public school realm, right? Like, I think that's something, just what you just said alone about putting money into public school, but it is going to give parents choice in some way still within a public school sector. And I would 100% believe there's not one person we know in public ed that knows that happened, if it's not right in front of their face.
How much time do you think most superintendents of most public school districts spend lobbying politicians like yourself?
I know, especially in the rural areas, because I know those reps have a lot stronger ties with their superintendents. The school district's always the largest employer in the small town. A lot of them went to school with that superintendent or have a relationship there. Those phone calls happen a lot more often than for someone like me, where everyone knows where I stand on education reform. And I hardly heard from my superintendents as we debate these issues that way.
Because they know because why? Why do they not reach out to you as much as maybe?
I think I've just been very clear where I stand on it. This is where I'm at.
Okay.
I'm happy. I know that there is going to be a role even in a, if we went to universal school choice, there's absolutely still a role for public schools. Because they're going to be 75% of the education is still going to be happening through them.
Yes.
They need to be supported. But at the same time, we've got to be giving parents choices to find the education that best fits their kids.
This would be a good time to reaffirm and reestablish what you just said. We've had you on and talked about this before. We know that a lot of red states like Missouri that still haven't done this are because of rural Republicans who think it will torpedo their school. you counter that and you say, no, that's not so. First of all, we've seen evidence of school choice in other states, and that's not true. It hasn't happened.
But you just gave a stat saying about 75% of the kids still are going to be going through those public schools, even if we have universal school choice.
In rural areas, it's still going to be near 100%. I mean, if you're in Rockport, Missouri, there's not another school option. Right. I mean, yes, maybe you could homeschool, or maybe a church might form a small elementary level school that way. But I mean, all that education is still going to go through that public school because the supply and demand side.
So
of it
it's
all.
not going to hurt. I mean, that's what I think I want people to keep hearing is that.
Yeah. Do you
it just
think?
isn't
I mean, are we going to get there? Do you think there can be an education campaign of the educators in rural districts? Can superintendents and their Republican reps be convinced? Do you think? No, we're not coming after every single public school in the country. We're just simply giving maybe more suburban and urban kids a choice.
Absolutely. I think that can absolutely happen. I think we will eventually get there in Missouri. I mean, when we first passed the MOScholars program back in 2021, we were already 25 years behind Arizona and Florida when it came to school choice. So, I mean, we're trying to hit fast forward on it, but you got to remember it took, Arizona, I think, first passed theirs in 97. And they didn't get to universal till 2022. I mean, it is a 25-year process sometimes that we're trying to hit fast forward on. Wow. So we'll get there. I mean, people will realize that we just want parents to have the choice to choose the best school, and maybe that's the public school. For most parents, it's going to be the public school. But that decision should be left for the parent to find out what's best for their kid.
Absolutely.
Opposition has figured out the power of state legislatures, haven't they? I mean, I from what I read and understand, national politics are not where your political opposition are most interested now. They're starting to see the power of legislatures. So I think my urgency, I've got a clock ticking in the back of my own head thinking, gosh, Missouri used to be a purple, sometimes blue state. Now it's solidly red, but how long before Democrats figure out how to crack the code? It's sort of, which I know we're not technically supposed to be a partisan show, but when it comes to the issue of school choice, Republicans traditionally are for it. It's the Democrats who are traditionally against it. Do you feel that Republicans can hold, or do you see Democrats making inroads?
Well, and that's the fascinating thing. When it came to school choice, it wasn't originally a Republican idea. It was a Democrat idea. Yeah. In these in blue cities where the schools were failing, they wanted to give their inner city urban parents the choice to go to a charter school or go to somewhere else. That's why you had it. Milwaukee and Minneapolis were two of the first places that really had school choice because it was Democrats leading the charge. And it used to be a very bipartisan issue that only recently the teachers unions and others have done a very successful job of peeling off Democrats away from that and leaving it to be a Republican-only issue.
Interesting. So
coming to back to bringing it to Herzog a little bit, just because you are on the end of working with MOScholars and programs, what is I guess, can you speak a little bit to kind of what is happening with MOScholars? Again, this is always a hot topic.
Yeah.
Well, for people listening in, what is it again?
Yes, I guess we should
start
there.
So, MOScholars is a program where through private donation, kids can receive a $6,000+ scholarship to go to an accredited school of their choice, whether that's religious, whether that's an independent secular school, whatever private school that they think best fits their educational need, they can go to through this MOScholars program. So over 1,500 kids were able to get a scholarship across the state of Missouri this first year. We're just wrapping up year one, so we're still trying to figure out what the next steps are for year two, but we're all looking to expand the program to continue just get more and more kids into it and more kids that are achieving their best education possible.
And at this point, is it looking like homeschool will fall under that piece, or is that still kind of up to the different organizations that are involved?
That is still up to the different organizations that are involved. I mean, homeschooling is definitely an option under the state statute. There were some proposals to edit that a little bit this year that actually cleared the Senate some, but then died in committee in the House.
Right,
so.
And I know homeschooling groups, a lot of them they don't like
we've talked
they
about
don't
this
like what
so
MOScholars is doing.
The proposal that cleared the Senate would have actually divided homeschooling up into two separate classes. I mean, other states have done this. Iowa has 5 different types of homeschooling up there, but it would have had a traditional homeschooling, no ESAs, no playing public school sports, and then they would create a different version of it called flex schooling that would have allowed you to play on your local public school sports team or any of the extracurriculars, speech, band, whatever you want to do. And then also have access to those ESAs. So it would be a very lightly regulated version of homeschooling.
And I think that just that phrase, that lightly regulated piece, is what throws people off into.
Because dividing it into two, you had groups like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association were very much in support of this because it was protecting traditional homeschoolers that want to be protected, and those that want to opt into something else
are able to
have that option.
That sounds amazing.
Of which you and your wife are members. You are homeschoolers. People should know.
We absolutely are. Yeah. So I was homeschooled all the way through elementary and high school. My wife was as well. So we are on second generation homeschooling now. So we have a first grader. So it's an adventure.
I love that. But I want people to know that too. About like you can still advocate for public school. You can still advocate for quality public school. You can still homeschool your kid. You can do all these things under this and still allow for someone. We don't get to use the we don't get to use the MOScholars scholarship. We don't get to do that, but I know that plenty of people do, and I want them to be able to also do that. And all these things can exist.
I'd also like to see a better bridge built between homeschooling and private Christian education. I wish there was a better communications bridge. There seems to be a little bit of a chasm that I don't necessarily think needs to exist, but that's my words and my interpretation. We're kind of new, so maybe people that have deeper feelings about it would disagree, but I think we share much more in common in terms of our goals than not.
Absolutely. And I mean, some of that is there's a little bit of a changing of the guard happening when it comes to homeschooling. Here in Missouri, we finally got homeschooling laws approved back in the 80s. And that group that led that charge are now kind of aging out or no longer quite the leaders that they were of the homeschool movement. And it's just you have a bunch of new homeschoolers that came into this, especially post-pandemic, that have wildly different views on what it means to homeschool. I can't even imagine. Yes. So they don't have the fears that they had in the 80s of any government strings or any government touching homeschooling that they had back then. So there's a difference. There's a culture clash coming in from the generations that way in homeschooling.
Just like with everything else.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Representative, thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.
it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I love when we can have him in to speak with us. It always gives me a little bit of clarity. But I have to say the one thing that continues to stick out is the infighting within the parties, within these political parties, that is preventing a lot that could be happening to benefit families everywhere, to benefit parents, to give them choice. Yeah. That is beyond angering to me. And I talk about this all the time. I cannot stand when I'm up against people or talking with people and they get mad at every person in a certain political party all the time for not doing everything. And, we have to take those small steps, but even those small steps are getting thwarted all the time. And it's because of infighting, and it's because people can't just have a clear goal and get going.
Learn your state rep.
Yes.
Learn your state senator. Know who those people are. It's important, and you should talk to them and know how they vote on this issue wherever you live.
Know your school board members. Yep. Know who the mayor is. Reach out to them. You have to know who they are.
Speaking of reaching out, one more time, if people want to reach us.
Yeah, so they can call us, or don't call us. They can email us at hello@makingtheleappodcast.com. You can find us on social media at Instagram and Facebook at Making the Leap Podcast. Twitter, you can find us at making_the_leap podcast. Any of those will work. Anytime you go ahead and listen to us online, if you are listening on iTunes, if you can go ahead and leave us a 5-star review, leave us a comment. That's always helpful to us. We love the engagement. We love to reference that. And we always, as always, look forward to seeing you next week.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.